So let's break down as to what is the purpose of schooling and what is the best way to enable that.
Should students be allowed smartphones in school?
Absolutely.
If anything, now is the time to amp up our math learning even more. In a world that's dominated by AI, what skills should we teach them today so that they're ready for that world or, be relevant in that world?
Can I ask this question on ChatGPT?
Hi and welcome to this episode of the Q Don't Tell podcast, where we discuss how to nurture and educate our children. My guest today is Pranav Kothari, CEO of Educational Initiatives or EI. Pranav is someone who shares our passion for making children learn with understanding. Through innovative tools like MindSpark for math, science and English, Pranav and his team at EI are creating a huge impact on shaping young minds. Pranav, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Manan. Excited to be here.
You've had quite a journey, transition from a Harvard MBA graduate. You also spent time as a BCG consultant and as an investment analyst, and now a decade at Educational Initiatives, and now it's CEO. What sparked this move? And, was it a singular movement or was it a series of things that led to this?
There were many moments. In high school, I had a physics teacher who was actually an IIT Bombay gold medalist who had sort of given up all career and decided to become a teacher. I think that sowed the seeds. But I think at Harvard, I attended a lot of social enterprise initiative talks. Some classmates were Teach for America fellows. And as I was going through those 2 years, I felt incredibly lucky to get to go to some of the best schools and colleges in the world. I did my 2-year full-time MBA there.
Okay.
And prior to that, I'd worked for 5 years. After finishing mechanical engineering at Georgia Tech.
Okay.
And I don't think all of that was just because I was very smart. It's also because I got the right advisory from friends and family. Someone paid for my education. Someone provided the emotional support. And in many ways, they didn't need that back. So I said the best use of my education is to be a support system for others to get a good education. And that's what led me back to India to find something to do that.
And how's the journey been?
It's been very fulfilling. I think there are times when you're grappling with the complexity of the problem, but it's a very important and a meaningful and interesting problem to solve. And that's what's kept me here.
And how's the CEO role been?
Before this role, there was always someone you could go and complain, cry on their shoulder, tell them, oh, why don't you tell this person to do that? And I think in this role, the buck stops at you for everything. So I'm learning now not to make excuses and take ownership and prioritize on what's most important.
We are in the same boat on that one.
Yes. It's a lonely job, and so you need peers to be able to keep you motivated.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is your own take on education? How should kids be taught? How should education happen? How should learning happen?
I like to define it as how can students learn more than teachers teach, right? Just keeping that as, because ultimately it's not what you deliver, but what has been received by the student from that perspective.
So transfer from the teacher to the student?
And hence that's why I think that learning for a student can come from multiple sources, including the teacher, right? It can come from experiences, it can come from the environment, it can come from adults, it can come from teachers, it can come from screen time, it can come from software, gamification, games, many things. But some of the things that I've seen as most effective is helping students see where they might use this knowledge in the real life. I think connection to real life has been useful. Of course, in young adults, a lot of the Montessori type, physical manipulatives, playing around with that has proven to be effective. Tutoring has proven to be very effective. I think, especially as it gets to personalized tutoring. And Bloom sort of talks about this, the mastery-based learning as almost 2 sigma more than the standard classroom. So I think there's some literature out there on what's very effective learning.
I was reading this interesting article once about what the author calls aristocratic tutoring. So the theme of the article was this provocative question about why are we not producing geniuses anymore? So what do you think should be the purpose of education? Should it be to elevate a few minds into geniuses, or should it be to elevate the entire body of learners to a minimum threshold? What's your own view here?
Of course, we need everybody to cross a minimum threshold, and I define that as reading an unseen passage and drawing meaning from it. The ability to do math that's useful in life, to develop a sense of computational thinking or quantum, to develop a scientific inquiry mindset so that you question before you sort of assume something. So I think there are a lot of these skills which are universal, which for people to be productive citizens of the future would need to be done. I do quite like the Socratic method of, let's say, asking questions that cause children to think. I mean, a lot of our work is at the heart, basically questions. And waiting for students to give an answer and give them instant feedback and customized feedback for them to think and try again. And I think the learning that happens in this dialogue based manner is what sticks with them for a longer term and strengthens and sometimes even remediates conceptual flaws. But it's hard to explain this, because most people think learning happens by great teachers teaching one way. But I actually think if teachers ask good questions or software asks good questions, getting children to think and come up with an answer after repeated failures might actually cement it for the longer term.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually our whole philosophy. Cuemath, the reason we call ourselves Cuemath is the best way to learn math is when the teacher is cueing and not telling. And that's actually the theme of this podcast as well. How do you cue and not tell? How do you create systems where you nurture or nudge rather than push or prescribe? And I think when you create such environments, there's this natural motivation that arises in the learner to kind of keep moving forward, because they are the active driver of the learning process. And I think that's why we try to do everything from that lens, cue and not tell. So yeah, very aligned there.
That's interesting. Please share more, because I know there's so tempting to just give the answer or tell the student how to do it. So tell me more about the science of, nudging, and especially how do you get your teachers to hold the discipline, even when it's so feels nice to give away the answer.
I think telling is very hardwired into our minds. As humans, we want to tell, we want to offload whatever's on our minds, and teachers are especially prone to do that, because that's how the education systems for the last few decades, perhaps couple of centuries, have worked. And our goal always has been, how do we invert the whole thing, and how do we get the student to be the active driver of the learning process and the teacher to just kind of provide the right cues and nudges. But it's not easy, and what we've found is that instead of trying to train teachers to change their behavior, you have to nudge them in real time. If they are going off track, if they are telling more than cueing, you have to tell them in that instant that they are telling and not cueing. So one example is something that we built recently called Talk Meter. So what Talk Meter does is, let's say if I'm tutoring you and I'm the teacher and you're the student, and I start to talk more and my talk time starts to go up, it tells me in real time. It's analyzing our audio feed all the time. It starts to tell me that you're talking more, you need to talk less. And it conversely tells the student to talk more, because we believe that if the student talks, if there's math talk that is generated in the class on the student's behalf, it just leads to clearer thinking and the neural patterns become more reinforced and so on. So the whole idea in our tutorial sessions is the teacher acts as the cuer to generate that thinking in the student's mind and that talking in the student's mind. But yeah, we have about 4,000 tutors, and getting all of them to do this can never happen by training, is what we believe. So we try to build these product tools. You've used this phrase, learning with understanding. The child should learn with understanding, and especially when it comes to something like math. And this is obviously something that deeply resonates with us at Cuemath. How exactly does this happen? This learning with understanding. What do you really mean by it, and how do you enable this?
Yeah. So I think I would like to talk about understanding, memorization, and rote, because I sort of see those as three different things. What we actively stand against is rote, which is memorization without understanding. So you've memorized a proof, you've memorized a theorem, You've, let's say, even memorized the steps on how you solve a multiplication problem or many of those things. That, I think, is you're just getting procedural fluency, or you're just getting to exercise your recall. And modern world problems or the workplace will not come from a finite syllabus or a prescribed textbook, right? Then let's say memorization. And memorization can be helpful. For example, memorizing tables is helpful because then when you do factorization, you do division, you got to be quick enough to be able to do it. Like, you can't be computing all the time. So I think that's something that's important. But I think if you can get the conceptual clarity right, then I think that's the highest order. So let's take the example of area. Most students would just say, looking at a rectangle, the area is length into breadth, and just do it, right? So if that's all they can do, then that's, in my thing, would be road. But if they can understand that the area is essentially unit tiles put together, and the reason you're multiplying is because you're repeatedly adding the same number, and hence the multiplication of length into breadth comes in. And area is a sense of the space that is occupied. Then I think that's where you have the conceptual clarity correct. But of course, you have the ability to compute area quickly, and knowing the formula for surface area of a sphere versus that of a triangle comes handy. So both conceptual clarity and sort of the ability to do it quickly then intertwine for you to sort of do more advanced concepts for which these are prerequisites. But simply memorizing definitions, memorizing dates, diagrams, which battle was fought when, I think those are useless things. And unfortunately, our board exams test a lot of that.
We often use the phrase why behind what.
Yes.
Which is, I think, what you are alluding to. Yeah. So you don't just memorize the what, but the why underlying it. Like if you're doing the area of the triangle formula, then how does it come about? Or why does the Pythagoras theorem work, right? Yeah. So is that what you're saying, essentially?
Yeah, I think both the science behind how did you arrive at, let's say, a formula of half breadth into height, but also, let's say, when you are, let's say, doing comparison of decimals and realizing why 3.25 is a smaller number than 3.7, even though a lot of students say the opposite, is because they think 25 is bigger than 7, or they think 325 is bigger than 37. Like, they haven't understood the place value or the concept of a decimal, right? So once you have understood what does it represent in terms of the fraction or the decimal equivalent of that, then one, it sticks with you longer. The chances that you'll remember in adulthood is much higher because you've deeply internalized the concept. But today we don't remember a lot of the things that were tested in 10th and 12th because they were transient information that obviously Google has it and ChatGPT has it. And it's just a fact that you don't need to know. So when I say learning with understanding, I'm talking about that when you see 1/4, are you understanding that it can mean both a quarter of a pizza, but it could also mean 1 apple out of 4 fruits, and they're both 1/4.
I see.
And having that clarity at the conceptual level is a good predictor of success in life.
Okay, that's great.
Yes.
And I was reading this essay report that had some very concerning stats, like over half of teens struggle with simple division. And as with your role at EI, you would obviously have done a lot of these evaluations of student learning levels across tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands, or even millions of students. So why do you think there is this problem? What are we really missing when it comes to math learning? Why this math problem? And therefore, what is the solution to this?
So the problem as it relates especially to lower income and government school children is extremely weak fundamentals. Like, most of these students have not gone to kindergarten. They've gone to an Anganwadi, but that's largely for nutrition and safety or daycare, but not really for building early childhood proficiency in recognizing numbers or to be able to touch and feel and sort of count. And unfortunately, with that weak fundamental, everything else tends to sort of fall apart, right? So, for example, if you want to add a quarter plus 2/3, you kind of need to know LCM to solve that. To know LCM, you need to know multiplication. To know multiplication, you need to know addition, subitization, all the way down. Now, people, as they grow older, keep migrating to higher and higher classes. The teacher's only job is to finish the syllabus. And as these basic rocks are not in place, the children are not able to then do multiplication and division, as the report shares. So one thing I would attribute to is very weak fundamentals that compounds to a point of no return where a child just drops out of the school system because everything is Greek and Latin to them. But this is a solvable problem, right? I think it sounds silly that foundational literacy and numeracy, which is literally multiplication, I mean, it sounds trivially simple to learn. So why is half of India not learning? It's fixable by paying attention to it, by sort of providing the right set of resources, generating awareness. And if we do all of that, I think we can get there.
Okay. We've spoken about this in the past. If you look at the Indian education system as a whole, and there's potentially tens of billions of dollars of spending happening, I think you mentioned more than 100 billion, perhaps 200 billion. And all that is feeding into a machine, and what is coming out is uncertain outcomes, let's say, if you just model it in that simplistic manner. Where do you think is the highest leverage in terms of solving the problem? Is it teacher training? Because I've read in so many places now that teacher training interventions have limited impact at best. Is it investing in more technology? Is it changing the curriculum? How do we change the system? What is your theory of change?
Yeah, we are spending more than $100 billion of your and mine taxpayers' money into the education system, and for 20 years or more, India's education levels have not improved. This is shown by the Pratham Zasar report, by the one time India participated in PISA. EI runs these assessment studies every year for the last 23 years. So that's quite sad. And from an external public finance perspective, it's not a great return on investment that is happening. Now, to solve this problem is like solving Bangalore's traffic, right? No, there's no one silver bullet. The form of teacher training that has shown to be effective is when it's concept specific, just in time before the teacher starts teaching the topic. Okay. And if the teacher had access to what are student misconceptions, what percentage of students nationally face this issue, what can I teach or remediate in such a way that children do not have these misconceptions, will have a positive impact on the student learning. But generic teacher training, which is just calling them and explaining them classroom management, is perhaps basically zero on that. On technology, there are 20 studies that show that technology in education doesn't work. And these are mostly when you just drop hardware. Like you've done the one laptop per child, or you've done satellite classrooms, which is one teacher in a studio with teaching lakhs of students on the other side, or smart boards. I think those have shown no impact on learning outcomes. However, when technology is personalized for the child, when the child is getting feedback that's both instant and customized to the mistake they've made, when it's based on some pedagogy research as opposed to just digitizing a textbook, when it's contextualized in a language of comfort for them, when it's data-driven, iterative things we've done, it has shown some of the largest impacts in learning outcomes that have been there. And we have been subjected to many of these randomized control trials for the MindSpark software. We've also obviously found, anecdotally, that peer learning tends to help. So if we can, get India to also help students learn each other. Otherwise, we've had a very individualistic focus where everybody's taking an individual test and learning individually.
So can you double click on that, peer learning, and how does that help exactly?
I think when students, let's say, you and me, and I'm struggling with the concept that you actually know, and I ask you for help, and you are providing that help, I'm likely to ask you clarifying questions. That in turn clarifies any kind of misunderstanding that you might have had. So even when you're teaching me, your learning gets strengthened as a consequence of that.
And could you scale this up, a peer learning system across the public schooling system, perhaps?
It's theoretically possible. It's as a behavior, we have not demonstrated this before, right? So if you visualize classrooms of today, there is one teacher teaching students.
Yeah.
We rarely see students teaching other students, except maybe at home with elder siblings. So it's not clear in my head how we could scale this up, but the potential exists. And I think if we can encourage students to do it, because there are, half the time there might not be a teacher in the room, and you can have students sort of do this, but it's hard. At least I've not seen it happen practically, except
it's an interesting
small pockets.
idea though.
Yeah.
So what is the MindSpark approach? How does it work, and what has led to the impact that you've seen?
One, I think, borrowing with your cue, don't tell strategy, we are asking the student a question. For example, MindSpark Math has no videos.
Okay. No videos.
There are no videos in MindSpark Maths. Let's say we were to start the topic of perimeter. We might show an ant sort of walking around the boundary of the shape, just to seed in the thought that, perimeter is not 4L. It is, the length of what you walk around.
The boundary,
the boundary. For area, it might be these unit tiles that are placed, and you're not asking for formulas, but you're asking questions. You're waiting for the student to give an answer. So if a student does nothing, the software does nothing. Unless the student gives an answer, right or wrong, the software then gives you feedback on what the right answer could be. It can give you a hint. It might even visually show you through an animation how you could come to the right answer. And then it'll give you a copy question, a similar question, to get you to try again. And if you get that right, it would very micro ask you the next question. So if you got 1/5 plus 3/5 correct, it might ask you 1/5 plus 3/7. And if you sort of mastery that, it go to subtraction and so on and so forth. Similarly, it would go to the prerequisite knowledge. So the approach to MindSpark is get students to give an answer, give them feedback that is personalized to their mistake, and give it instantly. You remember, like, when we used to get homework to do in notebooks, we'd give it to our teacher and get it 3 days back, and it would just be marked right or wrong. That's not useful.
It's
because
very
I've forgotten.
It's
I've forgotten why I got it wrong. And I've not understood why I got it wrong. From linear equations, if I take an example, like we see 3x plus 7 is equal to 10. Many students would then say 3x is equal to 10 plus 7. And they would get on to something and get x is equal to something. Now, when you get marked wrong, you are very demotivated because you spend some time to get there and you don't even know where you went wrong. But imagine that at the step where you wrote 3x is equal to 10 plus 7, I were to give you quick feedback and say you need to subtract 7 on both sides. And give you a chance to do it again. The chances that this causes learning to happen is much higher. So that's sort of a bit of the philosophy on the MindSpark Math. I think, different subjects are different. So in English, it's more of a well-rounded approach towards not just grammar, but also story, vocabulary, many of those things. In science, there are a lot of topics are interconnected, and to bring that out, to bring to simulations is important. But the core philosophy is no lecture videos. Exercises, animations, experiments, speaking it out, reading it out, a very active form of learning.
Active learning,
and also adaptive. So what we find is that the average 8th grader classroom in our public school system has students who are the equivalent of grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So even the world's best teacher, even if you and I walk into the classroom, we are facing extreme heterogeneity of learning, even though homogeneous socioeconomic conditions are there. And so what you need is digital assistants who can adapt to the child's current level. So regardless of the fact that I am 13 years old in the 6th grade, I may just need 2nd grade curriculum to learn from. And I think that's the power of technology. In fact, there's layering this on, and there's a Bombay school which is students are learning from MindSpark in Marathi, English, Tamil and Urdu in the same building.
What? Wow,
Which is physically very hard to do with a human teacher. So I think if I look at it, what's the core competitive advantage of human teachers is the ability to inspire, teach values, do experiments, facilitate debates, show through manipulatives, do many of those things. And I think what the comparative advantage of technology is be available anytime, anywhere, be infinitely patient, non-discriminatory. And I think man and machine together can do much more than either of them alone can.
Yeah, I think on that we're very much aligned. We actually have a phrase for it. We call it the Iron Man philosophy. You put a human into an Iron Man suit, and they can fly, do superhuman things, right? So
yeah, in fact, I like to say that technology will help a teacher achieve their intent.
Okay,
which
wow,
is
that's
every
a
teacher
good phrasing. Yeah,
wants genuinely each and every child to learn, but doesn't have the time and energy to do it. And technology should just help a teacher achieve their intent.
That's brilliant. Yeah. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, but enough about like how Mindspark learns maths. I would love to learn about these math wars I'm hearing. There is all this debate. Am I doing even useful stuff, Manan? Like, do children really need to learn algebra through Mindspark? Like in this age of AI and ChatGPT and Google?
I think, the first time I heard about these math wars and this kind of watering down or dilution of how much math kids should be taught and so on, I was actually fairly surprised, because for me it was always a straightforward implicit thing that, everyone needs to be fluent at math, right? Everyone needs to be math fit, because the language of the universe is math, right? Underlying everything is math. You look under the hood and there's math there, right? Whatever you do. And if anything, with the changes happening in the world, with the way AI is rising, with the way the world is dramatically changing, right in front of our eyes, and how different the world is going to be 5 years, 10 years, 15 years out from now, I think the one ability that needs to be a constant for humans, and children who will grow up to be adults a few years out, is the ability to think and reason.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to teach that than math. You teach a child mathematical thinking, you teach them the ability to do math and see math. They just become such better thinkers. There's this open letter that a group of AI leaders wrote recently, which I think it's called Math Matters, mathmatters.ai. And, this is people from OpenAI and other places. And they are essentially saying that, if anything, now is the time to even amp up our math learning even more.
Yes.
Because the underlying foundation of all our AI systems is math.
Yes.
Linear algebra, statistics, probability, etc. Right? So if you don't teach our kids today these skills, they are going to face a world where they'll be obsolete in almost every sense, right? If anything, it should be the other way around. We should actually be getting kids to become more and more math fluent. But obviously that doesn't mean, you put them into cram schools or you teach them arcane, exotic problems. You give them skills that they can apply. You teach them statistics. You teach. So maybe there's a fundamental revisiting that's needed of the curriculum itself. So the way the K-12 math curriculum goes. And there are several ideas there. Many thinkers have come up with very good ideas, like Paul Lockhart, who's you might have heard about him. He's written this book called A Mathematician's Lament. He has written these 2 books on arithmetic and geometry that treat the subject matter in a very different, much more elegant way. And, something that kids might actually, if they go through that, they might end up falling in love with it. So I think, firstly, the focus on math should only sharpen and expand and amplify. And the way we do math, the way we teach our kids math, needs to change to focus a lot more on the why. Why something's working, and on the application of the subject to real world contexts that matter to them, or that'll excite them in some way. I'll give you an example. So I was recently talking to a child, this is a 6th or 7th grader, and we were discussing the concept of volume, and there was a back and forth, and okay, what's volume and so on. But then I posed a very interesting problem to this child. I said, consider all the gold that's ever mined in the world, ever, throughout human history, by all the empires of the world, all the reserves that governments hold, like the Indian government and the US government and so on, and try and figure out that if you were to put all of that gold together into a cube, what will be the size of that cube, right? So this kid, he kind of takes off, and 2 days later, so this is someone I know from my family, and 2 days later he comes back to me and tells me, so the answer is actually fairly stunning. It's like the first time you hear it, it's unbelievable. The answer is, all the gold in the world put together will form a cube of size just 22 meters on one side. That's it, 22 meters, right? Because gold is so dense and it's so rare. So, but this kid, for those 2 days, he was trying to figure out gold density. He kind of went into a little bit of history, which empires or countries mined gold, and where does most of the gold today come from, and so on. So that single problem on how much gold is there in the world sent him off onto this excursion that opened up so many possibilities. And I just think we should be doing a lot more of that with our children. How does GPS work? Why are bees? Why do they build those hexagonal honeycombs and so on, rather than just teaching them in the abstract? So I think that needs to fundamentally change, but we definitely need to amp up and sharpen our focus on math. I think these whole math wars, to me, it's actually, it's a bit weird. What do you think?
Thanks for sharing that wonderful example of cueing him to essentially get on the gold journey. And I think a lot of learning itself is interdisciplinary, as you sort of showed in the example. I think math is super important. I personally feel tremendously benefited by, linear algebra or calculus. It would, beyond sort of the procedural way of getting to the answer, I think it built in me a sense of quantum. My ability to size up, an area, let's say an apartment, my ability to sort of get to a quick estimation of what something might cost, my ability to sort of think in multiple dimensions, I think all have roots in math. Some of this is more subconsciously, but I think math has just been a wonderful enabler to do many things. And I think and the good news, Manan, I feel, is that students find math difficult, but I think you and I can sort of help make it easy for them. What I have found on math anxiety, for example, is that it quickly dissipates when they start getting it correct. So for example, on factorization, when students get it wrong, if the software, without disclosing to the student, just takes them to the prerequisite knowledge of, let's say, factors and multiplication, at some point, the child might even be getting 2 multiplied by 3 and answers 6 and gets it right. The moment they get it right, the body posture changes, they feel confident, they feel they're on the right path again, and the ability to ratchet up goes up. So I think math anxiety can be solved by adapting to the child's current knowledge state. And I think Professor Mihai calls this a zone of proximal development and
flow.
Flow. And you are in your blog, you sort of talked about
productive struggle,
and I think in this case, the student's ability to bounce back comes out, and I think anxiety goes down. And I think everything else is essentially can be structured, where the child can see it in multiple different visual elements or different algebraic elements, or even now we can add audio to many of these things. So I think inherently math is not difficult. Of course, students face different levels, but I think there are ways to solve it. And then why not maths? It's not like we're asking someone to build a 200-story building where only one of them has been built. I think this is something that millions of people have mastered over the centuries, and I think we can codify it.
I also think that beyond the utilitarian aspect of teaching kids math and the application of math, for me personally, there's also spiritual component, to math problem solving. So, math is like this platonic world of, great ideas and great problems to explore. And sometimes when you are lucky or fortunate enough to come across a problem that's, very challenging in the beginning, but then you stay with it, you persevere, and ultimately you're able to, cross the bridge, so to say, and unfold and solve it. There's this immense sense of joy and peace, and I think that's entirely missing, from our entire education system. I'm sure you would have had some of those, eureka aha moments of discovery, or just that sense of peace almost, that you get when you unfold a difficult thing. I hope that we are able to transfer more of that to our kids, but it's very hard to do. It takes very inspired teachers to do that, and I've been fortunate to have had some of those in my life. But that's one element I see as missing.
And I think the way we might get there is that we have enough human teachers. Of course, there's a bell curve on the quality of that, But I think what you and I are doing are building platforms to make them 20%, 50%, 90% better than where they are, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think we should think about every teacher to be like that one favorite teacher we had in the school. That might be utopia. But I think if we can just get teachers to be 10% better every month, I think students will benefit a lot. So I think the scalable way to do it, I mean, India itself has 300 million students who go to 1.5 million schools and study under 9 million teachers. And of course, the globe might be 6 times that. The scalable way to do that is to build a systemic capacity to enable the teachers to be more effective. Because I think they have the intent. It's just that they're not supported enough by the system.
Let's talk about AI. The pace at which the AI world is changing, and ChatGPT has been around for about a year and a half, and already we can see, so many cool things that it can do. You mentioned you've yourselves been using generative AI in some of your product work. What I'm interested to know is your view on, given how fast AI is evolving and where it might be 5 years, 10 years out, when our children today, will be entering adulthood, what skills should we be teaching them today so that they are relevant and or their skills are relevant and not obsolete in a world that's dominated by AI, and where even human reasoning can be done by AI? So what do our kids do then, and what skills should therefore we teach them today so that they're ready for that world, or they're prepared to be relevant in that world?
Can I ask this question on ChatGPT?
I already done that, by the way.
And what did you find?
Oh, yeah, it's like creativity, resilience, emotional intelligence, collaboration, leadership, so all of these things. Right. But I'm curious to know your own personal view, and what would you, teach kids in your own family about today? How would you set them up for that world?
Yeah. I don't know is the honest answer, but if I were to speculate, what comes intuitively to mind is perhaps computational thinking, which is like pattern recognition, abstraction, algorithmic thinking, because I feel somehow that the more you know about that, maybe the way you prompt the generative AI might be better, or you might also be able to fact check if something seems amiss. Like today, a lot of times we use triangulation as a way to do a smell test or a gut test of whether something sounds right or feels right. So I think computational thinking seems to be one. Second could be, I think, language skills. And I'm saying, like, for example, today we have 25 million coders roughly in the world. I think we can get to 100 million coders because I think English will be the new coding language. Because if you can sort of express this in English well into AI, it can write the code for you. Right? The syntax is possible. So I think that might be a useful skill. I think you've mentioned many that are timeless, and I would agree to the pieces on resilience, largely defined as good citizenship and a bunch of skills within that. Of course, collaborative problem solving is something that we only end up learning at work.
Yeah, exactly.
For the
very
first
late
time.
In our lives. Yeah.
Very late in our lives. And all our testing today is very individualistic.
Yeah.
So at EI, we're even thinking of how do you assess collaborative problem solving? Okay. How do I even assess 3 people together?
Okay.
It's not something that has been done before.
Have you done any work on that front yet?
Very preliminary. Because the system is not amenable to... it's too different from the current behavior of testing students individually with their roll numbers and marks at the individual level. I think some MBA schools do like group interviews, and I think that's the closest, but I don't think it's a very structured assessment in that sense. So to your question of what's relevant in the age of AI, we're still discovering. Yeah.
And what do you think is the future of schooling? How would schools look like 15 years out, 20 years out? Will they be the same physical setups with 1 to 40 classes, or do you see some dramatic shift happening?
I hope they are very different.
Okay.
One of my lament is that even COVID couldn't change the way schools run. Right? The biggest thing school leaders were excited after COVID was, everything will be back the same way it was again. And I was like, oh my God, a pandemic couldn't change and shake up the school system. And when schools in India were closed for 2 years.
Yeah.
So let's break down as to what is the purpose of schooling, like, in terms of, and what is the best way to enable that? So let's take, at least from my school, I remember a lot of my friends, and I think socialization
is
of
one big element.
Same age people. Of course, you have some residential neighborhoods now that do that, but for by and large, to have people of the same age getting together, playing together, debating together, dancing together, peer learning together. I think that might be a function that the school might still be a good candidate to provide, especially as we get into more nuclear families and more single child families, kind of a thing. I think access to a human teacher / inspired leader / motivator might be a good way to do it. Of course, children are motivated by their parents, but I think just going to a school and having very inspired teachers being there to motivate me might be a function schools could look at. Of course, I can talk about sports and some of the creative arts and many of those elements. I hope we're not doing 1:40 and batch processing. That's to learn the scholastic subjects of language, math, science. I mean, that just would be a I think with more attention deficit, I think that would just get harder. So, I think we would have to look at what is a school, a physical place where 400 people get together is better off doing, and what can you do in terms of home learning through the use of tutoring or adaptive learning softwares to do the core subjects. That's how I would look at it.
So if I take a slightly larger frame, I remember reading somewhere that, in the 70s, 60s to 80s, that era, chess was considered the ultimate pinnacle of human thinking. And then in 97, DeepMind beat Garry Kasparov for the very first time. And all the chess grandmasters in the world, I think, had this collective shock that, ultimately they've been bested by something artificial. Now we're already hearing of models, reasoning models that are solving math Olympiad level problems. They are working through the steps entirely on their own. At some point, you will have human level reasoning, and it may not be very far. It may be 10, 15 years out. Do you think collectively as humanity, there'll be some psyche change at that point when artificial systems are doing almost everything better than us, including thinking in the most general sense? Or do you not believe we'll get there? What's your personal view on AI from that lens?
I think there's a high likelihood we'll get there. People have usually underestimated the power of technology for the longest time, and then there's a step over when this happens. So I think we will get there. I don't know if it's 5 years or 20, but it seems possible at the rate of change that we see. Your next question will be, what will humans do?
Yeah. What will it mean to be human then, if even the most general, highest order of thinking is being done artificially?
Maybe solve problems that protect our future, problems of climate, problems of, let's say, mindsets. We're seeing so many wars right now. We're seeing the hottest days ever. We're seeing tremendous pollution of our oceans, of our lands. I think for humans to almost have a survival instinct, we have only one planet to live, solving vexed problems, problems that even whose solutions we don't have. We might be aided by AI in terms of, let's say, they are a brainstorming partner, they are a number crunching partner in the room. But there's a chance that the human creativity to solve problems of that affect all of us might be a role that humans could play in.
So are you worried, or are you excited about
I'm
AI?
excited about AI. I feel that, if you look at the last 100 years, and actually if you look at the last hundreds of millions of years, it shows that we are in the best ever place in terms of safety, security, prosperity, as documented in several books, right? And I think a lot of that is because of technology. I count AI as a subset of technology in that way. And so historically, technology has created more good than sort of the ramifications of using technology. So I'm quite excited by AI, and I broadly think we'll be able to partner up with it to solve problems that we're not able to solve today.
This phrase that you used, personalized learning, and adapting to every child's individual level. Every child is a unique mind.
Yes.
It's a multi-dimensional system, and the dimensions are very large. Do you think we can ever get to a point where, as many tech leaders have said, or at least prophesized, or just made predictions on, that at some point every kid on the planet will have an AI tutor that completely personalizes instruction for them, and therefore, you may still have human instructors, but for all the non-technical stuff like motivation and social connection and so on. But every student has an aristocratic AI tutor almost, right, working with them one-to-one. Do you think that's a future that's possible?
Absolutely. I feel like we're there today itself. A lot of our work we have seen where unfortunate reasons that a human teacher was not available, but children learned. There are case studies like during the pandemic where some of our students learned about 5 equivalent years of schooling in 2 years sitting at home. So I think technology-led individual tutoring software for them to master the scholastic subjects already exists and will only get better through the use of AI. Now, a couple of things in terms of both what is personalized, and then let's also talk about what the human teaches. So there's, Dr. Bror Saxberg basically says that every child can learn as long as there's a structured learning path and sort of motivation. Right?
Yeah.
And that's how I sort of see the role of the structured learning path and a lot of that through the personal tutor and motivation, both through technology and non-technology.
Okay.
Now, on personalization, what are the dimensions of personalization? One is language.
Yeah.
You got to learn in a language of comfort. You can always have a second language. And like, for example, in our government school students, the computer screen, the student can click a button and it splits the screen where on the left is mother tongue language, the right is English.
Okay.
So you start building those bridges. So language is one. Second is the pace at which they learn. Third is the learning pathway. So no 2 students in our software have had the same learning pathway. Fourth is the skin in which they see content. So it could be a favorite sport. It could be a certain color. It could be background. The next would be the emotional support, right? So through a variety of text and voice-based prompting, you can ask students to slow down, to remain inspired, to provide happy smileys, and there's different emotional support that you could build in. And what the favorite for our students has been actually the Sparky leaderboard.
Sparky leaderboard? Okay.
Yeah. So, they get a Sparky if they get 3 consecutive questions correct.
I see.
So they got to do it mindfully. And they get on top of the leaderboard, they can see in their classroom, in their city, and at the global level.
I see. So is that exciting for them?
Leaderboards are very exciting for students. And that's, in a way, is motivation, that I say. So this is the, and more is the extent of personalization that you can do. Of course, anytime, anywhere, any place. So you're risk insured against COVID break, summer break, winter break, pollution break, and many of these breaks, unwanted breaks. So that's part A. Now, I think on the human side, I've been humbled on this before. I think, I've asked students, why do you come to learn? And I'm secretly hoping they'd say, oh, MindSpark is great. But they've said, nay, the Didi is very nice. Bahut maze karati hai. This is a very safe environment. I really like my friends. And I think that is what I think human teachers would be able to
the inspiration or the
supplement. And let's face it, there are times when MindSpark fails even after the child has tried 5 different approaches with it. And what we do is we alert the teacher saying that for Sonu, this learning topic, MindSpark failed at teaching. Can you please step in and do it? So I think the role of responsible tutor is also to let the teacher know as to what they are not able to break ice with. And maybe the teacher just comes, sits with them, uses a pen and paper or a digital whiteboard, helps them explain it, connects it to real life, gives an analogy that might be so nuanced that's not possible to codify, to just unlock or the stumbling block that is there. So I think
So the man-machine combination is what you are
Yeah,
getting
and
to.
let's say, Manan, like we stood second last on the PISA. The math scores in the US on the Common Core have been at the lowest ever.
Yeah.
Let's agree that a only human-led approach
Will
has
not.
not solved the problem for 75 years in India or
Yes.
hundreds of years in the US. So
Yes.
the only way out of this is sort of technology integration. But again, there's nuance to this technology, and I kind of like quickly summarizing what works is adaptive, based on pedagogy research, customized to the context of the child, data-driven improvement, so you know what the child has understood, what they need to do next, and what's the evidence that it's working and how does it improve. Under those 5 filters, technology can make the most dramatic impact in learning.
I'm now going to ask you some rapid-fire questions.
Oh, no. Okay. How rapid? How much fire?
Yeah. Should students be allowed smartphones in school?
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh,
You want
really?
me to say more? Yeah, see, I think access to anything that's available should be allowed. So let's say paper was a form of technology invented a few thousand years ago, and we're allowing paper, we're allowing textbooks, we're allowing compass box, pencils,
Okay, so you
pens.
see that as a tool.
Yeah, I see smartphones as well. I feel smartphones, access to internet, access to paid version of GPT
Should all be there.
should all be there because they're available. Then why not? If anything that's available, that's not harming.
Should students use AI tools like GPT for homework?
Absolutely.
The same reasoning. Okay.
Any tool that's available, like let's get our students to do something in homework that GPT can be an enabler for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Top 3 skills that every child should learn in school.
Tough one. I want to say humanity / citizenship.
Okay.
Kind of a little saddened by how individualistic some students have become.
Okay.
So I don't know, sharing, is that a skill?
Yeah.
So humanity, sharing. I think maybe doing deep work. Unobstructed, like because we have so much attention deficit, right? Like today's attention span has gone down. So I think the ability to, for 45 minutes, do something like continuously deep work.
Okay.
Those come to mind immediately.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Should standardized testing be abolished?
No, definitely not. I think they provide lots of rich information. They give us a sense of what students have misconceptions on. They give us a roadmap on what we need to do, and for those reasons standardized tests are important for us to know, because if you do everything unique, how will you do analysis of that data? So standardized tests give us the ability to sort of know where students are, and any central level changes, textbook changes, teacher training changes, curriculum changes will have to emanate from data, and that's what standardized tests give us.
Okay. Can AI tutors replace human tutors?
Well, let's say we can have both. Like here, I don't see there's a trade-off. I feel like every Cuemath tutor, when supplemented with an AI tutor, will just do better. And let's say the AI tutor is going to be much cheaper than the billing rate of your human tutor. So why not? I mean, what's stopping us from having both? I don't see it as a resource constraint. I don't see it as an operational constraint. And so I would say absolutely have both.
Okay. Is homeschooling better than traditional schooling?
Probably this is the only diplomatic answer that I have to give. But the point, Manan, is there's such a big bell curve on both, right? So imagine a very dedicated parent who's willing to spend full time with the child at home and take them to the museums and the parks and sort of do that. I think that might be a case where they are better than the traditional school. But if they're just at home, it's delegated to a computer with internet, and you kind of have both parents working, then I'm not so sure. So I feel the bell curve is there, and then to each parent his own in terms of what they can afford in terms of time versus money. But it's kind of hard to pick one on that. Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite book?
Well, I like biographies.
Okay.
I read the biography of Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Was it good?
You just like Leonardo was ahead of his time, like 200 years ago. Like if you look at the detailed drawings that he did, the number of disciplines that he was a master at, from art to engineering to science, it's just like I was blown away by one individual hundreds of years ago to have achieved mastery through dedication. I was very impressed, and of course the paintings in the book are just stunning.
Are you reading any biography now, more recently?
Of Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, great character.
Yeah.
And who's the educator who inspires you the most?
There are a few. We spoke about my physics teacher. There was Clayton Christensen at Harvard Business School, specifically about this talk on how will you measure your life, and sharing his life stories, and what I think was one of the pivotal moments for me in choosing to be in this sector.
Okay.
So I would pick those two because I think they are responsible for what I do now.
Okay. Wow. Pranav, it's been a great conversation, and I'm excited to know that while we are coming at the problem from very different angles, we do one-to-one high dosage tutoring for students across the world. You do large-scale impact work with millions of students, but we essentially share the same ideas. I think through this conversation, what was very inspiring and exciting for me was that we are thinking about the problem in broadly the same way, and in our own ways. I do hope that we end up creating that impact that we are seeking. So, great conversation. Thanks for joining me, and it was lovely chatting with you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Manan, for hosting and asking those questions. I think you kind of helped me remind me that the human connect is something that's very important. I sometimes get into a very, tech can do everything zone, and I've been wrong many times on that before. So I think this conversation kept forcing me to think about what's a good complement to the tech tutor element. And I think, going down memory lane so many times, including why math, was inspiring. So thanks a lot for hosting and curating this excellent set of questions.
Thank you. Great, and best of luck.
Thanks a lot, man. It was a pleasure.